Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from your UPSC perspective. Today, let us discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper, dated 28 July 2020. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in your description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion. The first news to be discussed appears as an editorial on page number 6. It says in reverse gear. The draft environment impact assessment notification needs wider consultation and progressive changes. So this particular editorial highlights about various concerns with respect to the draft environment impact assessment report of 2020. Now here it's important to understand that this particular draft environment impact assessment report of 2020 seeks to replace the environment impact assessment legislation of the year 2006. And the draft environment impact assessment has been legislated as per the Environment Protection Act of 1986. So some of the concerns highlighted in this editorial is with respect to exemption provided under this draft from public consultation in certain projects with respect to environment clearance. The next concern is with respect to certain projects which are exempted from environment clearance as well as permission, and also certain projects under the draft environment impact assessment report of 2020 which have been exempted from public hearing. So as of now, the government has floated this draft and it is seeking public opinion. However, earlier the window for public opinion sought by the government was very less, and this window had to be extended through a Delhi High Court order. So, in this regard, the editorial suggests that the government was not very keen for a wider consultation on its draft environment impact assessment of 2020, and only because of the judgment of Delhi High Court, whereby the government had to extend the window with respect to public participation till August 11. So, in this regard, the editorial suggests that the government is not very much keen on considering public consultation or even certain suggestions from the public which are highlighted with respect to the concerns on this draft environment impact assessment of 2020. Now, this topic becomes important with respect to your upcoming prelims as well as mains examination. As in your prelims examination, this topic gets covered under general issues on environmental ecology, biodiversity, as well as climate change. And from your mains perspective, it gets covered under GS paper 3, particularly with respect to environmental impact assessment. So, since this particular term has been provided in the syllabus itself, hence this particular news becomes very important from our examination perspective. Now, as per this draft environment impact assessment of 2020, projects as per the draft has been categorized as project under category A and certain projects under category B. Now, all the projects under category A will require environmental clearance from the central government, that is from the Central Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And further, the rest of the projects have been categorized as category B. Now, the projects under category B has been further classified as projects of B1 category and projects of B2 category. Now, this categorization of projects into B1 and B2 will be done by the respective state governments as provided in the draft. Now, the projects which becomes part of B1 needs clearance from state governments and accordingly require preparation of environmental impact assessment report. However, the projects which will be categorized as B2 projects will not require any environment impact assessment report. So this again becomes at the discretion of the state governments whether to categorize any project as B1 or a project as B2. And this might also increase corruption in respective state governments with respect to categorization of projects under B1 or B2, and also with respect to clearance provided by state government with respect to dodgy EIA report. So after understanding these basics with respect to the draft environment impact assessment of 2020, let's go through some of the concerns as has been highlighted in this particular editorial. Now, as already mentioned, that there are certain projects which will not require environment clearance or permission. Now, this particular aspect has been explained in detail in section 26 of this draft legislation, which provides for approx 40 projects which will not require environment clearance or permission from requisite authorities. So in this regard, the editorial highlights that some of the projects are very important and needs to have environmental clearance, such as dredging or desilting of dams, reservoirs, barrage, river and canals for the purpose of their maintenance, coal and non-coal mineral prospecting, seismic surveys which are part of exploration surveys for offshore and onshore oil and gas, including coal bed methane and shale gas, and also with respect to thermal power plants using waste heat recovery boilers without any auxiliary fuel. So, according to the editorial, these projects have significant impact on the environment, and accordingly, the government must provide for certain environment clearance with respect to these projects and also other projects which have been exempted under Section 26 of the draft legislation. Now, Section 14 of the draft legislation provides for exemption from public consultation in certain projects. Now, the moment we say that this draft legislation exempts public consultation, it basically means that public participation is avoided by the government. So, it says that Section 14 of the draft provides for exemption from public consultation, thereby limiting the scope of public involvement in various districts with respect to various projects. So, public consultation is exempted in certain infrastructure projects of pipeline which will pass through national parks as well as sanctuaries, construction of roads and highways passing through national parks and sanctuaries, and also certain building construction and area development projects which may take place in these national park or sanctuaries. So in all these projects, public consultation has been exempted. Further, all category B2 projects and activities. Now, as we have already seen that all category B2 projects will not require environment impact assessment report. Not only that, these projects have also been exempted from public consultation. Further, no public consultation is allowed with respect to projects concerning national defense and security or involving other strategic considerations which is determined by the central government, and all the offshore projects located beyond 12 nautical miles. So in all these projects, the government has exempted from public consultation. Further, the 2020 draft legislation on environment impact assessment also exempts public hearing, whereby it highlights that the draft has retained the clause that if a public agency or authority considers that the local situation is not conducive enough for citizen participation, then public consultation need not include a public hearing. So, again, it is on the discretion of the government. So, again, this situation is left at the discretion of the public agency or any authority of the government. So, in this regard, this editorial says that the government is trying to shield the draft from public opinion by closing the window early. As already discussed, that the window with respect to public consultation has been extended till 11th August by the judgment of Delhi High Court. So, accordingly, the editorial highlights that the government is not very much keen to seek public opinion with respect to certain criticisms on draft environment impact legislation of 2020, which seeks to replace the environment impact assessment of 2006. So, as a way forward, the editorial concludes by saying that the COVID-19 lockdown has allowed nature to spring back due to less pollution in the environment. However, most of these changes rushed in the draft will allow for denigration of environment including forest land, as it allows unregulated construction activities and also exempts public consultation in certain projects. So overall, the editorial says that the government must balance development along with our fast depleting natural resources as well as environment. Thus, this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of environment, and questions may be asked in your upcoming prelims as well as mains examination. With this, let's move on to our next news for discussion. The next news appears as a lead article on page number 6. It says, Needed a map for India's foreign policy. The article reflects India's deteriorating neighborhood relations as compared to the past, where, according to the author, India maintained a healthy relationship not only with its neighborhood countries but also with its extended neighborhood. Now, in this regard, the author highlights that India's foreign policies with respect to the present context has resulted in our belligerent neighbor, and accordingly, India needs a change in its foreign policy trajectory. So, in this regard, the author highlights three major problems with respect to present decline of relationship of India with its neighborhood countries as well as with certain countries in the extended neighborhood. So first is with respect to a closer alignment of policy with United States. Second is coupling of foreign policy with domestic politics, and the third is hubris. So overall, the author in this article has mentioned about India's declining neighborhood relations, and this has also been attributed to India slowly becoming an ally of the United States, and thereby the article mentions the US factor as also one of the major reasons. Further, this US factor is also straining India relationship with Iran because of the US pressure. Further, this article says that the government of India took certain domestic decisions which had regional impact, and these decisions are primarily with respect to Citizenship Amendment Act as well as abolition of special status of Jammu and Kashmir by removing Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. And because of India's domestic decisions as well as other decisions, it has impacted India's relationship with Afghanistan as well as Bangladesh, with whom earlier India used to maintain a very good relationship in the past. So, again, we see a deteriorating relationship from the past as compared to the present with respect to Afghanistan as well as Bangladesh. Now, China is seeing all these aspects, especially the fact that India is slowly becoming an ally of United States. So in this regard, China is targeting India first of all with respect to its foreign policies, and secondly with respect to its domestic policies. Now, in this regard, the author says that India's commitment to multilateralism as well as strategic autonomy in its policy initiatives needs a major relook. And this is because India is mostly aligning its interest with that of United States. Hence, it is losing some way its strategic autonomy with respect to its decision making. So, considering all these aspects, the author says that India needs to relook into its foreign policy trajectory. Now, this article becomes very important with respect to India's change of healthy relationship with its neighboring countries as well as countries from extended neighborhood from the past as compared to the present relationship. So, in this aspect, we must understand this article with respect to the US factor, China factor, as well as India's future policy initiatives. Now, first of all, let us understand about India's extended neighborhood. Now, this term has been defined in geographical terms, and it includes countries sharing land as well as maritime borders, whose list goes beyond geographical description of South Asia. So, apart from Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, countries sharing land and maritime borders with India are China, Myanmar, Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, as well as Maldives. Further, in addition, several other countries in proximity, however, outside this list, are also tied to India through close economic and diasporic links, and accordingly, the developments are perceived by Indian policymakers having strategic implications. So, considering this aspect of economic and diasporic links with different countries, one can include countries in Indian Ocean region, on the East African seaboard, in the Gulf region, Afghanistan, in the Central Asian region, as well as countries in the Southeast Asia. So, all these countries together can be said to be India's extended neighborhood as far as India's foreign policy initiatives are concerned. Now, this chart shows a comparison of India's neighborhood relations as compared to its past to its present. So, this article mentions about these different countries as well as about SARC. Now, with respect to SARC, the author says that SARC as of now is out of joint as India wants Pakistan culled out of SARC. So, effectively, SARC has become non functional in the present times. However, earlier, India was the de facto leader of SARC and used to take policy initiatives through the SARC platform. However, as of now, mostly SARC has become non functional, and India slowly wants to shift its perspective from SARC to BIMSTEC. Next, with respect to China, the author says that earlier in the past, India was competing and cooperating with China at the same time, and despite this, there were hardly any border clashes along the line of actual control between India as well as China. So, accordingly, the author says that the long border between India and China largely remained peaceful. However, in the present times, India is facing the gravest national security crisis in the last 20 years as China has changed its status quo that is, its policy measure or policy initiative along the line of actual control in the Western sector in favor of China. Now, another country which has turned hostile to India is Nepal. Now, Nepal was used to be India's friend and an all time ally, and India also maintained a very healthy and peaceful as well as friendly relationship with Nepal. However, Nepal has now turned the table against India and has recently passed a constitutional amendment changing its map by adding India's territory. Now, this has not gone down well with the Indian administration, and this has overall changed India Nepal's relationship. And this overall has effectively started a border dispute with India, although with help of China. So now Nepal seems to be acting on China's behest and is trying to create problems for India. Now, even Sri Lanka, which used to be good friend of India, has slowly tilted towards Chinese investment as China are taking massive infrastructure projects, including the Hambantota port. Now, the problem here is that this will impact India's maritime security in the Indian Ocean region, including Bay of Bengal, as China wants to ensure that it has a naval base in Sri Lanka, which is close to Indian waters. Now, with respect to Bangladesh, earlier Bangladesh enjoyed traditional goodwill and influence in India. However, now Bangladesh seems to be not happy with India, especially with respect to NRC as well as Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019. Now, another country in which India invested a lot was Afghanistan, as India invested billions of dollars with respect to development as well as infrastructural projects in Afghanistan, and also India maintained good ties with former president of Afghanistan, that is Hamid Karzai. However, all these have changed, and now India seems to have lost the Afghan track and is out of the multi party talks going on between Taliban, United States, and also Pakistan. So, here Pakistan has ensured that India remains outside the talk carried on between US as well as Taliban. Another major blow for India is its relationship with Iran, and this has come at the cost of United States. Earlier, India had committed itself to multilateralism and the Central Asian Connectivity Project, and accordingly, Iran was India's gateway to the Central Asian region through Chabahar port, and accordingly, India and Iran signed an agreement in the year 2003 with respect to the Chabahar port infrastructure project. However, because of the US pressure, India has gone slow on the Chabahar project, and now Iran has inaugurated a railway link project connecting the Chabahar port in the Gulf of Oman to Zahedan in Iran. And this has been done without involving India. Now, this railway link is very strategic for India as it provides a gateway to the Central Asian countries. So, the United States' presence in India's foreign policy has also impacted India Iran relationship. So, considering the changed relationship with India from that of its past to its present, let us understand the viewpoint of this author, especially with respect to three aspects as highlighted in this particular lead article. These three aspects are with respect to a closer alignment of policy with United States, coupling of foreign policy with domestic politics, as well as hubris on part of India. So after having this backdrop of understanding, it will become easier to discuss these three important points as highlighted by the author in this article. So, discussing the first aspect, that is closer alignment of India's policy with United States. Now, this aspect has been discussed in three particular subpoints. These are first, alienation with Iran due to US pressure, as we have just seen, growing China-Iran ties, and also China's assessment of India getting closer to US, and accordingly China's move with respect to India. Now, first is with respect to the example of Iran as put in this article. And this example is with respect to United States pressure on India. So, in this regard, this article has highlighted that the agreement to develop Chabahar port was signed in 2003, as already discussed. But because of pressures from United States, India moved slowly on the Chabahar project, despite the fact that Chabahar port granted India access to Central Asia bypassing Pakistan. Now, another example when India and Iran's relationship got strained was when India voted against Iran at the United Nations, when India scuttled the ambitious Iran Pakistan India gas pipeline project and also cut down trade ties with Iran drastically, all because of US pressure on India. Now, further the article says that after the Iran nuclear deal was signed between Iran and United States, India's relationship with Iran also improved. It highlights that after the signing of Iran nuclear agreement in 2015, India immediately stepped up oil purchases and expanded works at Chabahar port. Then in 2016, Prime Minister of India traveled to Tehran and signed a trilateral connectivity project with Afghanistan as well as Iran. Now please understand this that all these activities took place post 2015 when United States and Iran signed the JCPOA, that is the US Iran nuclear deal. Now, JCPOA stands for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and it was signed between Iran as well as P5 plus 1 countries. Now, P5 here refers to the permanent members of Security Council, that is United States, Russia, China, France, as well as United Kingdom, and plus 1 refers to Germany. However, the United States administration pulled out of JPCOA. So, this news says that when United States pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 and reimposed sanctions on the country, India again toed the United States line and accordingly brought down its oil imports to zero. So we see that India relationship with Iran has fluctuated with respect to United States decision making, especially with respect to Iran. Further, the article says that India has also deepened its defense and military ties with United States as Washington DC wants India to play a bigger role in the Indian Ocean as well as in the Pacific region including the South China Sea to contain China's rise. Now China is viewing this as an anti-China movement and accordingly China is eyeing any development with respect to India vis-a-vis United States very closely. Now, considering strained relationship between India and Iran, China, on the other hand, has recently signed a trade and military partnership with Iran. And the China Iran partnership will expand Chinese presence in banking, telecommunications, ports, railways, as well as various other projects. And in exchange, China will receive a regular and heavily discounted supply of Iranian oil for the next 25 years. Further, it says that this will also allow China to increase its sphere of influence in the Middle East, throwing Iran an economic lifeline and also creating new flashpoints with United States. So in this regard, the author says that these developments with respect to China and Iran will definitely impact India. And India, in order to remain close to United States, might take a decision which may antagonize Iran in the longer term. Now, this may have a strategic impact on India's extended neighborhood relationship. Now, considering these developments, China is also viewing these developments very closely. It talks about China's assessment of India's getting closer to United States. And here China is following closely the developments taking place with respect to India and United States, particularly with respect to development on the military as well as naval front. So, in this regard, the author says that while India has been cautious of becoming an ally of United States, however, India has steadily deepened military to military cooperation in recent past. And here, the author has quoted two examples. One is with respect to LEMOA, that is Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, and second is with respect to the fact that India has asked Australia to join the Malabar naval exercise to complete the Quad. So, these two developments are also being seen by China very closely. So the author in this regard says that these developments probably has altered Beijing's assessment of India and the border aggressions at different points on the LAC between India and China should not be seen as a localized conflict but rather as a part of larger strategic move initiated by the top administration of People's Liberation Army of China. So according to the author, China has already made its assessment of India getting closer to United States. And according to Chinese administration, India has already become a de facto ally of United States. So in this backdrop, the forceful altering of status quo on India-China border is, according to the author, a risky message to both New Delhi as well as United States of America. Now all these developments becomes important from our examination perspective. Now let us go through some of the questions asked by UPSC on international relations in the last 3 years. Now, as you can see, the question asked in the year 2017 was China is using its economic relations and positive trade surplus as tools to develop potential military power status in Asia. In light of this statement, discuss its impact on India as her neighbor. Now, this question was asked to be written in 150 words. The next question asked the very next year in 2018 was, in what ways would the ongoing US Iran nuclear pact controversy affect the national interest of India? How should India respond to this situation? Now we see this aspect of India Iran relationship vis-a-vis US Iran nuclear pact has already been asked by UPSC. So considering this topic becomes very important as well. And the year 2019, a question was asked with respect to India-US relationship. It said, what introduces friction into ties between India and the United States is that Washington is still unable to find for India a position in its global strategy, which would satisfy India's national self-esteem and ambitions. Explain with suitable examples. And this question carried 15 marks. So we understand that relationship of India with United States, India with Iran, and India that of China has been asked by UPSC in the past. So in this backdrop, the assessment provided in this article becomes very important for us to grasp. So after the first point, let us discuss the second point with respect to coupling of foreign policy with domestic politics. Now here the author has said that two domestic decisions of Government of India, one is with respect to Citizenship Amendment Act and the other with respect to abrogation of special status of Jammu and Kashmir, has impacted India's foreign policy with its neighborhood countries and also with certain extended neighborhoods having Muslim majority. So in this regard, the author says that two decisions of Government of India, keeping domestic audience and domestic politics in mind, had foreign policy consequences. And these were passing of Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 and removing the special status of Jammu and Kashmir by abrogating or removing Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. Now, with respect to Citizenship Amendment Act, the official position of India was to secure persecuted minorities from 3 countries belonging to 6 religions. However, this particularly left out Muslims and also certain subcategories of Muslims. Now, this overall resulted in regionalization of India's domestic politics. That is, the domestic policies of India having larger impact on foreign relations with different countries. So overall, it impacted India's neighborhood relations with certain countries like Bangladesh as well as Afghanistan, which are considered to be India's long-time friends. So, this article says that these countries are genuinely upset with India's move. Further, the article says that these two moves also impacted India's relationship with countries having Muslim majority, especially in our neighborhood, with whom India maintained good relations, such as Bangladesh took offense of Citizenship Amendment Act and National Register of Citizens. Further, even Afghanistan, which has been so far India's good friend, has lately seen certain anti-India protests. Further, with respect to abrogation of the special status in Jammu and Kashmir, it suspended fundamental rights in the Kashmir Valley, and this was done for a prolonged period. Now, the impact of this decision was that it damaged India's reputation as a responsible democratic power and gave propaganda weapons to Pakistan, as per the author. And this move also did not help much to remove militancy from the valley altogether. Now we all know that China and Pakistan maintains a very good relationship, and Pakistan was quite vocal with respect to India abrogating the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. So considering all these aspects, the author highlights that abrogation of special status of Jammu and Kashmir could be another factor that prompted the Chinese administration to move aggressively towards the border in Ladakh. So these can be said to be the international impact with respect to India's domestic policy decisions. And lastly, the author mentions or talks about the perils of hubris. Here the author says that misplaced confidence is not good for any rising power, including India, as great powers wait to establish their standing before declaring that they have arrived. So here the author says that India needs to learn from two countries, namely Russia as well as China. Now India needs to learn from Russia because Russia started acting like a superpower after it won the Second World War with the help of its allies. And China also waited for 40 long years before it started taking on the mighty United States. As since 1970s, China's only focus has been on its economic rise rather than fighting the United States or even India. So in this regard, the author says that first of all, India needs to be in a position from where it can assert its policies. Further, with respect to Nepal, the author says that India should not have used high handedness in Nepal during the country's constitutional crisis. And because of India's high handedness, it caused a traditional and a civilizational ally to turn hostile. The author further says that the updated political map which India released in November 2019 further rubbed salt into Nepal's wound, and it further intensified India Nepal border dispute. So, according to the author, these are the three problems with respect to present decline of India's relationship with its neighborhood countries as well as countries of extended neighborhood. Now, as a way forward, the article says that to address the current crisis, India has to reconsider its foreign policy trajectory, as India is a big power having one of the world's biggest militaries. Further, India is also a natural naval force in the Indian Ocean, so it does not lack resources to claim what is due in global politics. However, what India lacks is strategic depth. So basically, what India needs is a foreign policy having clear trajectory with respect to its direction, as well as with respect to its strategic goals, which India needs to achieve in the short as well as long term. Now, from your examination perspective, this topic gets covered under current events of international importance from your prelims point of view, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to India and its neighborhood relations, bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest, as well as effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interest. Thus, this lead article becomes very important from the perspective of India US relationship, India Iran relationship, as well as India China relationship, especially considering the recent clashes at Galwan Valley. So, with this discussion, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 6. It says, an opportunity to reshape healthcare. The COVID 19 pandemic may have unwittingly led to some desirable changes, and the challenge is to build on this desirable change. Now, this particular article highlights that how the situation of COVID has impacted the business of healthcare in India. And this is because unnecessary health checkups, operations, blood tests, etc., which was actually not required, has stopped as patients are not going to doctors for a general health checkup, as people fear to go to hospitals, especially during the time of COVID. So, this article says that because of the COVID situation, it has given time to rethink on our present healthcare needs and also healthcare structure and the way it operates, especially in the private sector. As mostly the healthcare in the private sector works on profit motives, and at times, because of this, they also indulge in certain illegal practices or certain unregulated practices. So it is in this regard this article mentions about these different aspects. First, the article says that there is a need to rethink on various treatment strategies such as chemotherapy, excessive health checkup, or any operation which is actually not required. Next, the article highlights about the increasing privatization of healthcare system, and this increase in privatization has resulted in stiff competition among the private healthcare institutions. And because of this, it has also led to certain unregulated health practices in India. Now, these unregulated health practices or certain health practices which cannot be outrightly declared as illegal impacts patients financially as well as health wise. For example, if a patient is admitted in a hospital, then apart from the major operation, the doctor also presses for other minor operations for which the hospitals charge excessively. And through these processes, the hospitals increase their profit or increase their revenue through these patients. And because of these unregulated practices carried out in hospitals, which impacts a patient and its families financially as well as health wise, this has created a sort of a trust deficit between a doctor and its patients. And it is mostly with respect to these unregulated and unnecessary health checkups or these surgeries leading to further complications, which in the first place was not at all required. And all these were suggested just to increase the profit of the hospital or that of the doctors. So all these unethical practices have stopped because of the COVID-19 situation. And because of the fear of COVID-19, there has been seen a dramatic decrease in number of patients seeking non-urgent care. And this has also reduced the routine admission and observation which earlier the patients used to seek from doctors or hospitals. Further, the article says that the lockdown has also reduced emergency cases, especially that of heart strokes or heart attacks. The article says that it may be mainly because of unpolluted air which the people are breathing, less work stress because of less travel to workplace, and also eating healthy food cooked at home. So these can be said to be some of the reasons with respect to reduced cases of emergencies in hospitals. Further, the article says that because of COVID and less number of patients visiting the hospital, it has reduced the cut practice prevalent in health industry. Now, cut practice refers to earning profits by referral. For example, for blood sample, for certain tests or X-rays, for certain procedures, MRIs, etc. So because of less number of patients, the prevalence of cut practice has reduced, and this has also reduced the profit margin of doctors as well as hospitals. So considering these aspects, the article also provides for certain negative impact of COVID-19 on healthcare system and infrastructure. The article says that it can lead to breakdown of overburdened healthcare facilities, especially due to overburdened cases of COVID-19. Further, the article says that because of increased patients of COVID-19, this may impact negatively on the morale of healthcare workers, including doctors. The next negative point is with respect to collapse of private sector healthcare institutions, especially because of the financial strain, as less number of people are visiting doctors. Another negative impact which the article highlights is with respect to decline in income of doctors and nurses because of less number of patients turning up to hospitals. And this may also drive the doctors as well as hospitals into unethical practices for larger profit motive. So here the government needs to regulate these unethical practices which may take place because of financial strain caused by the COVID situation. So the point is that post COVID-19 situation, the health industry will look forward to revenue maximization because of financial strain which they might be undergoing presently. So considering all these aspects, the government needs to relook into our healthcare structure and also regulate certain practices pertaining to unnecessary health checkups, especially by the private sector hospitals. Thus, this article becomes important primarily from the perspective of GS Paper 2, especially regarding issues relating to health. With this, let's move on to our next topic of discussion. The next news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 7. It says, the majority cannot afford a balanced diet. Every millions who are above poverty line do not have access to healthy or nutritious food in India. Now, this particular article is with respect to state of food security and nutrition in the World 2020 report, which is referred here as SOFI report of 2020. And this report has been released by Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Now, this report highlights that people in India above international poverty line, that is above $1.9 at purchasing power parity per person per day, still cannot afford healthy or nutritious diet. The article highlights that analysis confirms the fact that problem of poor nutrition in India is largely on account of unaffordability of good diets and not on account of lack of information on nutrition or taste or cultural preferences. And the large majority of Indians cannot afford a balanced diet. And this is mainly due to poverty as well as hunger. Now, based on this assertion, let us go through some of the questions asked by UPSC in the mains examination in GS paper 2. Now, as you can see, questions have been asked in the year 2019, 2018 and 2017. The question asked in 2017 was, hunger and poverty are the biggest challenges for good governance in India still today. Evaluate how far successive governments have progressed in dealing with these humongous problems. Also suggest measures for improvement. Question asked in 2018 says that how far do you agree with the view that focus on lack of availability of food as the main cause of hunger takes the attention away from ineffective human development policies in India? And very recently, the question asked in 2019 was, there is a growing divergence in the relationship between poverty and hunger in India. The shrinking of social expenditure by the government is forcing the poor to spend more on non-food essential items, squeezing their food budget. Elucidate. So we understand that questions on food security as well as its relation with poverty and hunger have been asked consistently by UPSC in the past mains examination in GS paper 2. So in this regard, let us discuss the important aspects highlighted in this article and also some of the important aspects of food security and nutrition around the world in 2020 report as published by Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Now, in this aspect, this article mentions about different types of diets. First is with respect to basic energy sufficient diet, which is approx 2329 kilocalorie intake is met by consuming only the cheapest starchy cereals available, for example, say rice or even wheat. Next is the nutrient adequate diet. Now, according to this diet, the required calories as well as 23 macro and micronutrients are met, and this diet includes least cost items from different food groups. And lastly is a healthy diet. This healthy diet meets calorie norms as well as macro and micronutrient norms. Further, healthy diet also allows for consumption of a diverse diet from several food groups. So, for a healthy diet, the Food and Agricultural Organization uses actual recommendations of selected countries. And in this regard, Indian government has also provided for its recommendations. The recommendation of Indian government includes consumption of items from 6 groups for a healthy diet. This includes starchy staples, protein-rich food, which includes legumes, meats and eggs, dairy products, vegetables, fruits as well as fats. Further, the government of India also provides for exact intake of these different diets. So the exact consumption of these diets includes 30 gram of cereals, 30 gram of pulses, 50 grams of meat, chicken or fish, as well as 50 grams of eggs, 100 gram of milk, 100 gram of vegetables, as well as fruit, and 5 gram of oil per day. So overall, a balanced and a healthy meal, but not excessive in any way. So this is what a balanced diet has been provided by the government of India. So in this regard, this report has certain findings for South Asia. The SOFI report estimates that 18% of South Asians cannot afford nutrient adequate diet. Next, it says that 58% of South Asians cannot afford a healthy diet. And in its report, Food and Agricultural Organization assumes that a person cannot spend more than 63% of total expenditure on food. So overall, it means that 37% of the expense is required for non-essential food items. Now, the report says that 5 years into the 2030 agenda, it is time to assess the progress and to question whether continuing efforts implemented so far will allow countries to reach SDG 2 targets. Now, this becomes an important point from your prelims perspective. Now, as you can see that the SDG 2 target refers to zero hunger. So it says that for this particular reason, this year's report complements the usual assessment of the state of food security and nutrition in the world, with projections of what the world may look like in 2030 if these trends continue. Now, this report also mentions about the impact of COVID-19. It says that the COVID-19 pandemic continues to evolve. This report attempts to foresee some of the impacts of this global pandemic on food security and nutrition. So, this report also highlights the impact of COVID-19 on food security. So, with respect to progress towards hunger and food insecurity targets, the report says that the 3 most recent editions of this report already presented evidence that decades long decline in hunger in the world, as measured using prevalence of undernourishment, had unfortunately ended. An additional input shows that almost 690 million people in the world, which is 8.9% of the world population, are estimated to have been undernourished in 2019. So the report has highlighted some of the important facts whereby it says that considering the total affected by moderate or severe food insecurity, an estimated 2 billion people in the world did not have regular access to safe, nutritious and sufficient food in 2019. Further, it says that the world is not on track to achieve zero hunger by 2030 as per the target of Sustainable Development Goals. It further says that if recent trend continue, number of people affected by hunger would surpass 840 million by the year 2030, and the target of zero hunger will not be achieved by the year 2030. Now, this again becomes an important fact from your prelims point of view. Further, the report also provides for an impact of COVID-19. It says a preliminary assessment suggests that COVID-19 pandemic may add between 83 to 132 million people to the total number of undernourished people in the world in the year 2020 itself, depending on economic growth scenario of different countries. Further, it says that food insecurity may worsen diet quality and consequently increase risk of various forms of malnutrition, which may potentially lead to undernutrition as well as overweight and obesity. It further highlights that low income countries rely more on staple foods and less on fruits as well as vegetables and animal source foods than high income countries. So the chances of undernutrition is more in low income countries as compared to high income countries. So overall the report says that there are still challenges in terms of assessing healthy diets. Now, with respect to the burden of malnutrition, the report highlights that globally, the burden of malnutrition in all its forms remain a challenge. And according to the current estimates, in 2019, 21.3% of children under 5 years of age were stunted, and 6.9% were wasted, and 5.6% overweight. So, accordingly, this report says that the world is making progress but still is not on track to achieve the 2025 and 2030 targets for child stunting and low birth weight. It further mentions that nutritional status of most vulnerable population groups is likely to deteriorate further due to health and socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19. Now, it also mentions about the economic aspect of assessing or having a healthy diet. The report says that the cost of healthy diet exceeds the international poverty line, that is 1.9 US dollars at purchasing power parity per person per day. And this makes unaffordable for poor to access quality healthy food. Further, it says that the cost also exceeds average food expenditures in most countries in the global south. And around 57% or more of the population of global south cannot afford a healthy diet throughout sub-Saharan Africa as well as southern Asia. Further, it highlights that all diets have hidden cost which must be understood to identify trade-offs and synergies in relation to other SDGs. That is, this report says that if zero hunger is not achieved, then it will have a spillover effect on other sustainable development goals, as other development goals might not be achieved as well. It says that two hidden costs that are most critical relate to health, that is SDG 3, and climate related consequences of our dietary choices and the food system that support these. Further, it also mentions about the health impact of our dietary choices. It highlights that under current food consumption patterns, diet related health costs linked to mortality and non communicable diseases are projected to exceed 1.3 US dollars per year by 2030. Further, it says that diet related social cost of greenhouse gas emission associated with current dietary pattern is estimated to be more than 1.7 trillion US dollars per year by 2030. So overall, this report concludes by saying that shifting to healthy diets can contribute to reducing health and climate change cost by 2030, because the hidden cost of these healthy diets are lower compared to those of current consumption patterns. The report further says that the adoption of healthy diet is projected to lead to a reduction of up to 97% in direct and indirect health costs, and from 41 to 74% in social cost of greenhouse gases emission in 2030. So overall, the report highlights about the economic aspects, health aspects, and also environmental aspects or environmental impact with respect to our dietary choices. So considering these reports of Sophie, the article also mentions about a message for India with respect to this particular report. The article says that Indian poverty line of 2011 and 12, which was defined by Tendulkar committee, which amounted to rupees 33 per day in urban areas and rupees 27 per day in rural areas, and this corresponded to roughly $1 a day at international purchasing power parity prices. So the article says that Indian poverty line is thus lower than the international poverty line used in the SOFI report. So, the article highlights that the actual number of people to afford basic energy sufficient and healthy diet will be much higher. So this editorial says that actual number of people who are unable to afford basic energy sufficient or healthy diet will be much higher. And this number must have risen in the last 3 months because of economic situation caused due to the unemployment because of COVID-19 lockdown, and also because workers in the unorganized sector suffered the major brunt because of COVID-19 lockdown. So accordingly, this article says that this result is completely contrary to a view of certain scholars, which says that poverty line in India may not permit a comfortable existence, including balanced diet, but allows above subsistence existence. However, according to the author, poverty line in India does not even cater to the subsistence existence for marginalized sections of the society. So, the author concludes by saying that if we want to reduce malnutrition and food insecurity in India, we have to address the problem of affordability of healthy diets. So, in this regard, the author says that although Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana is a right step in the right direction, but still remains inadequate to address the massive and growing problem of basic energy sufficiency as well as healthy diet. Now, recently, the Prime Minister of India has extended the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana till November 2020, as the Yojana ensures additional food security for millions apart from food secured under National Food Security Act by priority households as well as Antyodaya Anna Yojana households. So under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, it provides for additional 5 kgs of wheat or rice and 1 kg of pulses free of cost apart from whatever is provided under National Food Security Act to members of priority household as well as members of Antyodaya Anna Yojana households. And the Prime Minister of India has extended benefits under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana till November because of the COVID-19 situation. Further, with respect to food security, the government also announced Atmanirbhar package in May 2020 for such migrant laborers or families who were either not covered under the National Food Security Act or under any state schemes for food entitlements. And under the Atmanirbhar package, 5 kg of food grains per person was distributed free in May as well as June. However, according to the author, all these are welcome steps but still remains inadequate to address the massive and growing problem of basic energy sufficiency as well as a healthy diet. Now this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of GS paper 3 as well as GS paper 2. Under GS paper 3, it gets covered under public distribution system as well as food security, and under GS paper 2, it gets covered under welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population as well as government policies and interventions for development in various sectors, and also issues arising out of their design and implementation. Thus, this article with respect to nutrition, diet and food security becomes very important, as questions have been asked in the past by UPSC in GS paper 2. Now, after our discussion, this becomes your practice question for the day. The question is, consider the following statements about the state of food security and nutrition around the world 2020 report. Statement 1. The world will easily achieve the target of zero hunger by 2030. Statement 2. COVID-19 pandemic will not add more people to the list of undernourished people in the world. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements. 1. Contempt of court is given as an exception in Article 19 Clause 2. Now this is an extract of Article 19 Clause 2, and you can see that contempt of court is one of the options provided in Article 19 Clause 2. Hence this statement becomes correct. Second is, contempt of court has been defined in our constitution. No, this statement is incorrect, as the term contempt of court has not been defined in our constitution. So the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? So the correct answer is A, that is 1 only. So with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.